I provided a space for men to come talk about their stuff together beyond just sports and the weather and the mundane things that we talk about on a daily basis.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, creators, and disruptors who are fueling innovation in emerging markets across the country. I'm Tyler Kelly.
And I'm Leanne Buchanan. And today we're joined by Jermar Perry, who is the co-founder of The Village Path. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm wonderful.
So, Jermar, we're going to talk a little bit about your journey, what led you to the work that you're doing. But first, we want to get to know you.
Yeah, let's go.
We know you're from Philadelphia.
That's true.
We know that you don't miss too many 76ers games.
That's also true.
But I want to know, what's your superpower and how did you first discover it?
Wow. It's a great start to a great question. This is a question I ask too a lot. You know how you ask people questions, but you don't
Turn it
really.
back on you?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, off the top of my head, the one thing I would say in terms of my superpower would be I'm a connector. I love to connect people. I love to connect people to resources. I love to connect people to things I'm not even involved in. So I would say that's my superpower. Great question, though.
And when did you discover it? Like, how did you begin to realize that you were a connector? What in your childhood or experience growing up did the light bulb turn on?
I would say it didn't turn on. The light bulb was dim for me for a really long time. I don't think the light bulb really turned on to that superpower until I was a full-fledged adult and being in like the social work program and being in St. Louis, which I just moved here 6 years ago, actually, 6 Easters ago. So actually, I'm just coming up on my 6-year anniversary of being a St. Louisan. Is that right? Yeah. So yeah, I would say being in the social work program and just like starting to think about things in ways I didn't think about them helped me envision that superpower.
Mm-hmm. Well, one more quick question before I turn it over to Tyler. Like, what brought you into social work? What inspired you to get into this space? Is there some type of experience in your childhood or growing up that said, okay, I want to go into social work. I want to create ways for people to get access to therapy and healing?
Another good question. So I didn't grow up wanting to be a social worker. Actually, I just asked a group of kids the other day what they wanted to do when they grew up, type of question. And I actually wanted to be a postman. Was the first thing I wanted to grow up, was to deliver mail. I don't deliver mail right now, but I deliver services and try to help people heal through their traumas. So when I discovered that, actually, a friend of mine who was an educator back in Philly was like, oh, you'd be great. I'm working with young people. So I applied for this job. I got it. I worked there for a year. The program was great. Like a lot of great programs, I got defunded and canceled after a year of I worked there. So when I was about to move to St. Louis, I was about to say fit into, I'm really turning into a St. Louis native. And when I was about to move to St. Louis, my wife was like, you should apply for social work programs. You know, you love working with kids, so on and so forth. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And that's when I kind of began having a passion for social work and understanding it in ways, like I said, I didn't really understand it. So my wife just giving me like the sort of nudge to enter into this field, and then entering into it and being like, oh, I can do this. I was already doing it in a different way. So doing it in a more holistic way was kind of an understanding I had once I entered like SLU, which was where I graduated from.
So talk to me about your approach and how it's different.
Okay, I guess I'll go on the Village Path spill. So the Village Path, we mostly predominantly work with Black men and helping them find healing spaces. So I would say just that alone is different. Men in general really don't have many spaces to not just talk about sports. Like, I love sports. I watch every sport in Philadelphia. I even watch the Flyers and the Phillies and so on and so forth. But one of the things that I wanted to do when I got here was have real relationships with people. I didn't have a whole lot of friends when I moved here. It was just my wife and her family. I don't really have any family in St. Louis. Didn't really have a ton of friends when I moved to St. Louis. So the difference is that I provided a space for men to come talk about their stuff together beyond just sports and the weather and the mundane things that we talk about on a daily basis. So that's when the Village Path was birthed through something called the Healing and Writing Circle, which we do monthly still.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so the Healing and Writing Circle takes place in the Central Library, usually every last Thursday of the month. So we have one coming up at the end of this month. I think that's the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, it's just a space for men to come together to talk about what they go through on a regular basis. A lot of times, if you ask me before I did this what my day was like, I would say, oh, it was okay. Or I would have to think about it if you really were asking me, like for, people ask you that question, but they don't really want you to have an answer. They expect to say, oh, it was good. So we really try to get to the core of how you are doing. What is your day like? What has your week been like? What has your month been like? What are you going through? So we spend time doing that, and we go over something called the highs and lows, which is a typical thing. We call it a baragani, which translates to what's the news, Swahili word. A lot of stuff that we do kind of reaches back to like a lot of African sort of language and things like that. So basically, that's just it. It's a space for men to be vulnerable. And a lot of people get scared off by that. I think it's just a bunch of men in the room crying. And usually we do more laughing than that. There is a little bit of that, but mostly it's like laughter and joy and just sort of, getting our stuff out there together.
So I'm curious to understand your personal relationship with vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because vulnerability is sometimes a taboo topic to talk
Absolutely,
about.
right.
Especially when you're talking to men, and especially when you're talking to black men. And I'm sure we'll touch the cultural elements, but talk to us about how you developed a personal relationship with vulnerability. What did you have to overcome, and how did you change?
Wow. So, just, between me, you, and our listeners and whoever's in this room, I'm not great at vulnerability at all. To the point where my nephew, who, lives with my wife and I, was asking one day, he said, I never see you cry. Like, why is that? And it's because that's my thing. Like, that's what I'm not really great at. I'm not really great at being vulnerable. So I need a space to be vulnerable in, where it's like, this time, this day, I'm coming to talk about my feelings.
Yeah.
So it has to be more scheduled for me because, I'm busy. I'm running a business. I'm working. I'm taking care of children. I'm married. I have friends. I have mom. It's like all these people who kind of need from me. My day job, I oversee about 20, 25 boys at a local Catholic school. So there's a lot of need in that. So really, I am bad at vulnerability. It's not something I'm strong at or good at. So a few years ago, a great friend of mine, James Minert, started something called the Men's Story Project here in St. Louis, which is a national thing. We did it here. And this was kind of like the birth of the Village Path, because it was men coming together and sharing stories of vulnerability. And there, it was like, I noticed it was something that was needed further. And there was a need for it. So to answer your question, it's not something I'm naturally great at. I'm not a big crier. I'm not a big person who responds off of emotions. But that's like my thing. That's how I'm not, something I'm not really great at. So I had to create a space for it,
Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry just came out with a really good book.
Love Dr. Bruce Perry.
Called What Happened to You?
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Bruce Perry.
Exactly. And what I love about that book is they really unpack what trauma means. And for the first time, I didn't think about trauma in such a broad way until I read that book. So I'm curious, with the work that you do, how do you broach the conversation with people who are not social workers, who may not be in human services, who want to heal or want to understand what you're doing? How do you talk to them about what trauma means in a way that's relatable, in a way that doesn't turn them off?
Yeah, that's another great question. So it's like the old Field of Dreams quote, if you build it, they will come. So we built it and we provided the space, and hopefully they come. But also you have to realize that a lot of things are a little too academic for the average Joe. Now that I have a master's degree, I am quote unquote considered probably an academic in some ways. So that's also, to be, completely honest with you, something that I always go back and forth. Is it too academic? Is it something that's going to reach the common average person? Is this a need? Are we doing, as they say, a little too much with this? But what tends to happen usually is a lot of women reach out to us and inbox us and email us. Oh, my son needs this. You know, my husband needs this. My boyfriend, my brother. We hear it a lot. It's not really necessarily easy for men to seek these things out because, you know, like, for instance, when I fell off my Night Rider bike when I was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, the first thing my mom told me was to get up and boys don't cry. So we've been conditioned to sort of not share these things since a very, very young age. You know, my mom wasn't wrong in that, but she just, like, how would she know that boys don't cry? She wasn't assigned as a male from birth. But yeah, these things have been passed down to us. So really it's just kind of working and trying to destigmatize these things, which is a long process, to answer your question.
So talk to me about the vision for the organization. Like, what does the world look like once you've achieved that?
Ooh, that's a powerful question. That's something I haven't thought about, honestly. Right now, we've built the house, or we've built the village. Now we need to kind of furnish it. So that's a question that's kind of, you know, so far I can't even see it. Like, you know, I'm at the start of the village. I'm at the top of the hill. So yeah, that's something that we've actually started to think about. Like, what does that look like? What's next? Right now, what we're doing is forming a board for our nonprofit and becoming officially a nonprofit. When we started this off, we just started it off with the vision of having men come together monthly, and then we added other things to the village. So we added free therapy sessions. We added a podcast. We added different events, different ways for us to keep existing within these spaces. So yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest with you. But it's a great question, one that we're constantly thinking about.
One of the questions I'm wanting to talk to you about is about the interplay between Black culture and trauma and mental health. Because you mentioned that you focus on Black men specifically, and I think of all the subgroups of our population, that is the group that is sometimes the most victimized, the most demonized,
Right.
the most incarcerated, the most underserved,
Right.
and the group that probably has the least amount of resources from a mental health perspective, culturally and systemically.
Right.
How do you try to navigate that? How are you thinking about the role that you play in the broader system?
Whew. When I think about that, I get kind of stressed.
I didn't mean to stress you out.
And really, it's not just me, right? The one thing St. Louis has, if it doesn't have anything else, is it has great organizations. And really, it's just figuring out how to connect with those organizations because they're so far and so vast and across the board. And, you know, people are doing great work in the city of St. Louis in a number of ways and avenues. Some similar to ours, some different than ours, some in the middle. Yeah, and the cultural aspect of it all is that we just try to, like, again, we try to build it and they will come. We say this is what we do. We're unapologetic about what we do, and we try to have people invited into that space. So,
Is it that time?
Oh, yes. Are
Time
you
for the
ready?
lightning round.
yeah, let's go.
Well, if you didn't know vulnerability before, you're going to know it now.
Am I up first?
Yes.
A question I've always wanted to ask my parents.
Whew, that's a tough one. My parents are pretty open books to both of them, probably way too much. So I don't have those two parents who who you are afraid to answer or ask questions. My parents are oversharers. I guess if I had to answer them or ask them a question, it would be about their traumas, which both of them are pretty open about, but just knowing a little bit more about that.
A blind spot I have is...
We talked about it earlier, but I would love to be a big crier. I'm jealous of people who just can cry at the drop of a dime. To me, it takes me a lot for me to cry. I can count on one finger the times I've cried in the last 20 years. So for me, I would like to be like somebody who just boo-hoos at a movie. Like if that was me, I would be like, yeah.
Has there been any movies that have brought you close to tears?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know if anyone's seen this movie, but it was a book, The Hate You Give.
Oh, yes.
That movie had me like, it wasn't like full precipitation, but it was cloudy with a chance of rain that day. Yeah, and it was like, it had that little lump in your throat. So I had a little lump in my throat. Yeah, because I had a niece who lives with me who was around the same age, and she loved the book, and we saw it with her, and I was just thinking about her. Yeah.
The hardest lesson I've learned about love.
Man, whew. This is constant. I work with boys every day. So just kind of, like I said, they need a lot. So just taking it from that perspective, and not even like my wife type of perspective, is that you kind of have to have like a short memory. It's kind of like having to be a defensive back in football where you have to forget the last play when you just got a touchdown on you. So the thing I learned about love is to have a short memory.
At a party, you'll find me.
In the corner not speaking. But I'll be enjoying myself totally.
One
I
more?
think we each have one more. Yeah, we've got time for each of us.
My most tenacious vice.
Ooh.
My most tenacious vice. Ooh, that's a great one. You guys have great questions. I don't have that many vices. In terms of a tenacious vice that I have, that is a great question. I'm going to be thinking about, like, even if I gave you an answer, I'd be like, oh, that was the wrong answer. I have to think about that.
Fair.
I'll be thinking that. No, that question will torture me all night.
Trash TV, no, nothing.
Okay, you know what? I'll go down like the YouTube rabbit hole of like watching like really violent rap music. So when I leave here, I'll be listening to something like totally like probably people will be surprised I'll be listening to. So it's probably my most tenacious vice. Yeah.
Okay, last question. Today, I care a lot less about.
Today, I care a lot less about politics. Yeah, so I've tuned out to what's going on in the world as a form of my self-care because it's really sad, even if you think about what's going on in Ukraine or if you think about what's going on in St. Louis or Philadelphia or wherever in the world. So today I care less about politics, and not even just politics, but I would say current events. Yeah, I just want to stay in my little bubble and get stuff as I get it.
I was gonna say it'd be the change, like locally, like that's where it really makes a difference.
Yeah, because when I try to actually be the change. So when you're out there changing stuff, you can't really worry about the negativity. Sometimes that seeps in. Like I talked to my dad, who's retired and just watches the news all day, and who believes the world is ending. And I'm just like, if I had this thought process, I couldn't do what I enjoy doing, which is helping others. So yeah.
So, Jermar, how can people get in touch with you, with the organization?
So people can go to thevillagepath.org. That's THEVILLAGE.org. People could also hit us up on Instagram. We could use more Instagram followers who can't. The Village Path is the IG, The Village Path. Also Facebook, The Village Path. We're super accessible. I'm super accessible, probably too accessible sometimes. So yeah, hit us up. Check out the website. Check us out on social media.
Awesome. Well, I think that last bit reminded me we need boundaries, always.
Yeah. I'm terrible at boundaries. I just realized how bad I am at boundaries. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. So many gems dropped in this conversation. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, always enjoy the jewelry. So there you go.
Thanks, Jermar.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. This was great.
Thank you for listening to Innovation City. If you like this episode, you can find more episodes at innovationcity.co or anywhere where you watch or listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye.